Welcome to the Humanity Leadership Podcast. I'm David Wheatley, and we're here to talk all things leadership.
Well, my guest this episode is Jennifer Bedford, who for 20 years has worked for a company called TechSmith. And those that have ever used a tool called Snagit might know TechSmith. Apparently, I had it way early. But and if you've ever used Snippet on Microsoft products, it's like a poor person's equivalent. It's the cheap knockoff version of Snagit. So Jennifer's been with TechSmith for 20 years. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. It's very nice to talk with you today, David.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm always interested in women in technology and engineering. It's something that's expanding. And so I'd love to hear from people with a bit of experience in that area, especially in a leadership role. So I normally start by asking my guests to give me a quick 30-second bio of what got you to where you are.
Sure. It's interesting. 20 years at a tech company, when you think about technology 20 years ago, was completely different. When I applied to work at TechSmith, I responded to a newspaper ad in our local newspaper. And TechSmith was a pretty small company at the time. We had like 15, maybe 20 employees. And, over the 20 years, the evolution of technology, business, technology in business, and the growth of our company has been really interesting. And for me, I'd had some leadership experience prior to TechSmith. And I kind of started at the bottom rung. I started in more of an administrative service and sales role, and then moved up over the years. I spent some time in marketing as a salesperson, and then moved into some leadership roles. And for me, I think the leadership has been the most inspiring and fulfilling part of it. There's nothing I love more than running into someone that I managed when they were an intern many years ago and seeing where they've ended up and what influence our time together had on that. My role now, I work in our sales department as our operations manager, which means I have 7 full-time people that report under me, as well as managing our intern program of 6 interns that are all college students. And I love helping people grow and strengthen their career and kind of learn about the tech field, especially with our interns. A lot of them have worked before, but never in tech. So it's really something that I love watching them.
So I understand that you've had a significant role in ramping up your intern program. What steps do you take to help new employees be as productive as possible, especially those that are only going to be around for a short period of time?
Yeah, so it's been especially interesting over the last year. Our company's been remote. We continue to work 100% remote, but we really feel it's important to still have an intern program and grow future employees, whether they're at TechSmith or elsewhere. And so, there's things I've always looked to do with our interns, and that's that stay regardless of whether we're in person or remote. But there are definitely things that I changed a little bit this year. But as far as like making sure our interns are successful and productive, there's a number of things. I manage a lot of people. I am not a great resource for every intern every minute of every day. So I try to build a network for them on day one. With our intern program, we have a group of leads in our department that are kind of specialists in certain functions. And so they train on those functions. And I'm still a resource and a touch point for the intern. But from day one, they might meet with me, but they're going to meet with a couple leads as well. So they always have multiple resources. I prefer to have the expert in something be the one to train the new person, because I am not the expert in everything. And so I lean on people that know it and can teach it. We also use a lot of live trainings and also self-driven training where an intern might be practicing things or doing video review, in the time they're not in a live training. And we try also to focus on, as soon as they have enough knowledge to start participating and contributing to the team workload, we've highlighted specific things they can do in the first couple weeks, in the first month, so that while they're still learning, they also feel like they're doing.
Right.
And I think that makes them happier.
Well, I like those steps, because you're saying we network them closely. So let's make sure that they're not just dependent on one boss, because then that's isolating a little bit. But let's network them. Let's empower them, and let's give them enough training to get them so that they feel like they're involved as early as possible.
Yes.
So, and how's that worked in the virtual world? Because I imagine it's easy when you sat next to somebody in a terminal and looking at a screen, but how have you managed that virtually?
It's interesting that you asked that, because we talk about that all the time. I meet with the training leads once a month, and we kind of review what's working, what isn't, what do we want to evolve. And we also check in on all the interns and kind of where they're at in their training. And we did not have shadowing sessions with lots of different people. We just had the leads. And what we discovered was there's a lot of learning that happens when you're sitting near people. And just the turning around, asking questions, overhearing things. And so we tried to come up with a way where we could facilitate that remote. It's not exactly the same, but we tried to consciously add that to our training program. And the cool thing about it was actually a couple of our interns who mentioned it. It was their idea, but we took it and, adapted it and applied it to the interns that came after them, which was neat. So each of our interns works on a team of salespeople, and they have a training lead on that team, but they also have 3 or 4 other salespeople that are full-time, they're experienced. We actually have, throughout their first couple months, a system where they spend time with their training lead, but they also do an hour-long shadowing session, at least one, with each of the other full-time people. And it gives them the opportunity to literally watch the person work, ask questions, hear how that person manages things differently. Because even though our salespeople are doing similar work, they're not all the same people. So how they approach it, different tricks that work for them, are, something that the intern can learn from if they get that variety of, viewpoints. And it has already proven to be more productive for our interns. The first couple that we had start doing that, we're like, oh, wow, this person really did this one thing different, and that clicked with me. And now I'm better at this. And it's not that they were originally trained wrong. It's just everyone's mind works a little bit different. So seeing the different ways that people approach it helps them build their style.
Right. Yeah, I've been telling clients to try and emulate that organic environment that we sit in, and it sounds like you've been doing the same kind of thing. That idea of shadowing and following. Practically, how are you actually doing that? Are you having 3 people in a Zoom call, or?
We use Zoom all the time. We were fortunate that before we went remote fully, we had some staff who worked at least part-time remote. So when COVID hit, we had Zoom, we had chat tools and everything. So we basically just ramped up our use of it. And for this particular thing, for the shadowing, it's literally you are on a live Zoom call. The full-time person is sharing their screen. So the intern can see everything they're doing on their computer. They can ask questions live. They can talk through, the full-time person can talk through like, okay, I'm working on these leads and this is what I've got in my to-do list today. And this is how I prioritize it. And they're basically talking through everything they're doing. So it's similar to sitting at the desk with the person and doing the same thing, not 100%, but in some ways, the nice thing about Zoom is the intern can grab a screenshot. Like if they see something really interesting that they like in how that full-time person structures their work or anything, they can screenshot that and save it for later, which is something you really can't do when you're sitting over their shoulders. So
that goes back to that idea of you're emulating what it would be like if you were sat in the office and you're creating a Zoom call while somebody works. And so I'm watching somebody doing their work and I can see what's on the screen and I can talk to them about why they're doing it that way and what they're doing in the same way as I could if I was sat next to them in the office.
Yep.
One of the things is I was talking to Corey, who's one of my colleagues who works with you. He says you have a reputation for addressing conflict early. And that's, I'd be interested to know, how's that helped your career in doing that?
So I would say I'm better at this now than I was earlier in my career. Full disclosure, that's something that takes practice and comfort.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to make it sound like all 20 years I've been really good at this, because that's not true. But I think what I have learned over the years is if there's an issue, asking an honest, respectful question early rather than waiting for it to fester and become a bigger issue leads to better outcomes for all involved. Mm-hmm. Whether it's something that I'm in conflict with a colleague or I see colleagues in conflict, whether there's an issue with someone I manage, it's much better to bring it up as soon as we see the issue and then work with them to address it than to wait. Because, my focus, especially with the interns, is they're here to learn how to work as much as they are to learn about this job and company. Often they've had jobs before, but they've not had a tech job or worked in a business setting. So they're learning how to operate in that. And so it's my job to let them know when they're doing it well and when there's areas for improvement. And I found people want feedback. And as long as you're giving it in a constructive way and talking through it with them and giving them the opportunity to give their ideas and ask them questions and ask them to think about it, it can be really productive, because sometimes what I think the issue is might not be right. So I have to give them the chance to kind of give their side. This is something we've done a lot over the last year with doing our interns remote. It's harder to tell what the issue is because you're not sitting next to the person every day. So you need to say, that what you're observing, but give them an opportunity to say what they're observing as well.
Yeah, it sounds like I try to help my dad with his computer in England, and sometimes you say, "No, Dad, where's that key now? I have to try and think about it and remember that," because you can't actually see it. But what I hear you saying is something I've used quite a bit is you can either be a short-term good person and a long-term bad person, or you can be a short-term bad person and a long-term good person. So that idea of in the short term, I might be a little tough or harder or be more direct about this, but I'm doing that so that I don't regret it later on, or we don't regret it later on.
Yes, absolutely. The other thing that I really focus on in especially the onboarding in the first couple weeks is making sure there is a clear understanding of expectations, so that there's no gray area if they, the individual is not meeting that expectation. They have an outline of what is expected and what we're looking for from them. They can still ask questions and, we can talk about it, but I try to get upfront about that, because there's nothing worse than not knowing what's expected of you. Then how would you ever possibly know if you're doing it right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing worse than learning along as you're going along what I'm supposed to be doing. It's like you're putting the boundaries up all the time. So
Yeah.
you're clear up front about what the expectations are. You're quick to praise and point out areas of opportunity, and you actively engage them in what they're seeing and what they're doing to get some buy-in. So, and you also alluded to the fact that it's a little different on our remote kind of setting that we've got now. What tools are you using to keep that in check virtually? Because I'm sure before you walk around the office and you just say, hey, Sue, can I have a minute? And are you doing the same thing on Zoom? Does somebody get an email saying Jennifer wants to have a Zoom with you, and they go into, oh no, what have I done wrong mode?
So I have a set half-hour meeting with everyone that works for me every week.
Right.
And so that is our designated time to bring questions, issues to each other. However, I always make it clear that they can reach out to me outside of that. And then, so we use Slack as our internal chat tool. So we have group chats and direct messages in there. So I have that on all the time. It is expected, and this is part of that, making sure people understand the expectations. They're expected to be clocked in and logged into their Slack account and their email and reachable by those while they're working. But I also make sure they have my phone number, because one of the challenges we run into while working remote is your power goes out, your internet goes out. These are things you can't control. So I always make sure that they have my number, because if they have an outage or an issue or something, they can text me, we can work it out. But I've thought a lot about, with remote, I can't micromanage. It's just not possible. I'm not near them. I can't walk over to them. I can't, walk the aisle to see how everyone's doing. So I try and make myself as available as possible. I might even send a message here or there, even if we don't have a meeting today and they don't have a question. I might just send a, hey, how's it going? Just to check in with them. But the other piece of that is making sure that they have those other touch points. Right. So the training leads that I have, there is one from each of our sales teams. So we have 4 different sales teams, and we have an operations group, and we have interns in all of those. Each intern has a lead on their team that is a resource for them. And frankly, for the day-to-day doing their job, that lead is their better resource, because they do the same job just at a wider scope because they're full-time. I'm more of personnel issues, technology issues, company questions, policy, things like that, and then also career development. But for day-to-day questions about their work, they have another resource. And if their lead's not there, they have all the other leads from the other teams. So they have multiple people available to them. So it's almost like a team check-in and responsibility at all times, where they're accountable to their team and the teams work together and communicate throughout the day. And I'm an additional resource, but I'm not their only, and I'm not the only one who's kind of keeping up with them.
I see how that knits in now, because you're saying we give clarity up front about what the expectations are, but then we also get them connected one-on-one with as many people as possible, as early as possible, so that then they see that network, as you called it, as a resource sooner. And I'm guessing a lot of your questions are, well, have you talked to your lead about this? Because that's more likely to be where the answer is, and you redirect people to the right spot. And I like the idea of the communication platforms you've talked about as well, which is, hey, we have our chat function, which everybody's logged into. And I've been encouraging people to use there's usually some kind of red, yellow, green or notification that says what status is, in the same way as you would if you were at the office. If it's red, it means your door's shut and you're on the phone. If it's green, it means your door's cracked open and somebody could walk in and interrupt you. So that you're again emulating that what it would be like in real life. And then even, I like that piece over here, you've got Slack, you've got email, we've got our weekly half hour, which I think a lot of leaders are missing or have missed in the last 12 months. They never got into the discipline of plugging in that we are going to touch base for half an hour. We're going to create the space to touch base for half an hour every week. And then worst case scenario, here's my cell phone number.
Yep.
So you're giving people everything that they need. And I'm guessing that you rarely get the cell phone calls because they've got so much of a good network around them.
Yeah, the cell phone, literally the text I get is, hey, my internet's down. I'm going to log in as soon as I can, yeah. Messages. And then I'll send a communication to their team and everyone else and let them know what's going on. But, you know, I rarely get a, hey, I have a question on my cell. That usually happens in the other tools.
I've made a deal with my local credit union down in town here that if my power goes out and my internet goes down, I think it's about 20 minutes it will take me to, and I told them if I come running in there with a backpack, it's not a threat. I'm just in the middle of a meeting and I have to get back up again. And I hope that they have power. So the last thing I want to talk about, and I kind of alluded to this a little bit at the beginning, is how do you coach other women to grow as successful leaders in a tech organization? Particularly when you're talking about being remote, and we were talking about your daughter's Lego creations behind you. It seems like that we're still in an environment where the mums are the primary caregiver and they're balancing a job and a bunch of interns and everything else, as well as the kid at the other side of the dining room table. What are you doing to coach other women to grow in their leadership roles in this environment?
I think there's several things. As a woman who has worked the entire time I've had children, I think there's always the, oh, you can have it all and you're going to be the best at all the things. I think for women, I think this is for men too. You're not always going to be the best at both your jobs every day, all the time. It's not realistic. There are going to be days where you're going to be a better parent or spouse, and there are going to be days when you're going to be a better employee or manager. And then sometimes you'll be worse at one or the other. I think accepting the fact that I have chosen a life where I need to balance things and it's going to ebb and flow a little bit, is part, maybe it's because I've been doing it for a long time. My oldest is a junior in high school, so I've been working, you know, while parenting for almost 17 years. I've accepted the fact that it's a balance, and I do what I can to be a good parent and a good employee, and nobody's perfect. So, you know, accept that, learn from it, do better next time. It's kind of how I approach it. But, you know, the big thing for me, and this has been especially true this year, for all of my employees, not just women, because I have both men and women who work for me and that are trying to balance parenting. They have kids who are ranging all different ages. And with COVID, they also have some kids that are at school, some are at home, some are a hybrid, is flexibility. One of the amazing things about working for a tech company, you know, we are not a manufacturer where we have to go to a plant and build things during these hours or anything like that. We are a tech company. Not everything we have to do, or we do, has to be done between 8 and 5. So balance, flexibility, you know, I have things that come up during the day that I have to deal with for my kids or my home. And so do my employees. We respect that. We communicate early. We communicate often. We make sure we are updating our calendars, letting people know when we'll be unavailable. And we're just flexible and understanding. And I think that's the key for all working parents. And for managers of working parents, I try really hard to focus on quality of work and whether people are getting their job done, and less on how many hours and were they in at this time and out at that time. Now, some roles have time-specific work, but not all do. And so as long as you're treating people equitably and they understand you have time-specific work, but other things can be flexible, I can be flexible. You know, sometimes I get a call from the school saying my kid's been quarantined at 10 a.m. and I got to go pick them up in the middle of a work day. Happens to me, it happens to other people. We can flex with that.
Right. Yeah, it's making for a different environment, isn't it, that we can do that. But I really like the way you framed that at the beginning, that some days I'm going to be a great employee, but not necessarily the greatest parent or spouse. Mm-hmm. And I think the challenge is to make sure that you're not consistent in one of those. So if you're consistently the great employee at the cost of being a great parent, then you've got problems down the line. And that's the beauty of that idea of balance, isn't it? That today I was a great employee, tomorrow I better make sure I'm a great parent. And it's not that I'm not going to be a good employee. It's just that I have to maintain that balance.
Yeah, there are some days where I might have to work extra hours because I've got something that's really time sensitive. And so maybe I spend a little less time with my kids on that day, but I try and balance it by going to their sporting events, being, you know, active in what they're interested in, and using my PTO. You know, I think some leaders and employees are afraid to take time off. They gave it to us for a reason. I actually want people to take time off. And so I am not shy and not embarrassed to use my time off and go participate. And so I feel like that's something too. Like if I were working and online and sending email, you know, every day at like 10 o'clock at night, that models no balance to my employees. And so I try to lead by taking the time off, not always working, being available if they need, but not always so available that it appears I don't balance things.
Right. That's been a rallying cry for me to some of my clients in the last 12 months is if you're not taking the time off, you've just created a culture where nobody is. So lead by example there. So Jennifer, thanks very much for spending some time with us today. And I've enjoyed our conversation. And Jennifer's with TechSmith. Go and check out Camtasia and Snagit if you hadn't. There's my quick advert for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. This was great.
You've been listening to the Humanity Leadership Podcast. I'm David Wheatley. And we're brought to you by the book, What Great Teams Do Great, available now at all good bookstores. Thanks to Brian Spencer and Finkel for the music. Please share any feedback and suggestions. I'm available through humanity.com. And go to iTunes, like, subscribe, and leave us a review so that other people can find us. In the meantime, until next time we meet, stay healthy.